You won't believe what just dropped. Perry Stone has revealed a shocking truth about Joni Lamb that no one saw coming. Secrets long buried are finally coming to light, and the fallout could shake the Christian media world to its core. What did he expose? Why is it so explosive? Every word he shared threatens to rewrite the story everyone thought they knew. Brace yourself. This revelation isn't just news, it's a storm, and once you hear it, there's no going back. When Marcus Lamb passed away unexpectedly, the world watched in shock. But behind the cameras, a quieter, more personal drama was unfolding. Joni Lamb, who had long stood in the shadows of her husband's ministry, suddenly found herself at the center of one of the largest Christian media empires in the world. For years, she had been the steady hand behind the scenes, managing day-to-day operations and supporting Marcus as he took the public spotlight. Many viewers saw her as the supportive spouse, a comforting presence who helped keep everything running smoothly, but never imagined she would be the one to take the reins. The shift wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. Daystar Network had grown into a global platform, and with Marcus gone, someone had to lead. Joni's deep understanding of the ministry's mission, her years of experience, and her personal connection to the network gave her a unique position to step up. Yet stepping into leadership was far from easy. She faced the dual burden of grieving a husband and maintaining the trust of employees, viewers, and the larger Christian media community. Her role suddenly transformed from a background supporter to the decision-maker, a figure the world would now look to for direction. At first, Joni's leadership was seen as compassionate and collaborative, reflecting the warmth that many knew from her personal character. She worked tirelessly to keep the ministry's mission alive, making careful decisions to ensure continuity while honoring Marcus's vision. But as the months went by, it became clear that Joni's influence would extend far beyond maintaining the status quo. She began to take a more central role in directing programming, shaping policies, and guiding the future of the network. Her authority grew, and with it both admiration and scrutiny. Some praised her resolve and the way she held the ministry together during a time of personal and organizational upheaval. Others, particularly those close to the family or deeply invested in the original mission, worried that her rise shifted the balance of power too quickly, sidelining voices like Jonathan Lamb, Marcus's son, who had long been groomed for leadership. Joni's journey from quiet partner to public leader wasn't just a story of professional ascent, it was a story of resilience. She navigated grief, responsibility, and public expectation all at once, learning to make hard decisions while staying true to the ministry's purpose. Her rise redefined what it meant to lead Daystar, not merely as a continuation of Marcus's legacy, but as a woman asserting her voice, steering a network through uncharted waters, and proving that sometimes the most unexpected leaders are those who have quietly prepared for the moment all along. When Doug Weiss entered the picture, few could have predicted the whirlwind that would follow. Known for his work as a Christian marriage counselor and therapist, Doug had built a quiet reputation, respected in his circles but largely unknown to the broader Christian media audience. He specialized in guiding couples through emotional challenges, helping them reconnect, and offering practical tools for family life. His work was meaningful, impactful, and deeply personal, but it never involved the high-profile world of broadcasting, let alone the leadership of a massive network like Daystar. Everything changed when Doug married Joni Lamb, the widow of Marcus Lamb, in the years following Marcus's sudden death. The marriage itself was private, understated, a union rooted in mutual understanding, shared grief, and trust. Yet, with Joni's rising prominence at Daystar, Doug found himself in an entirely new orbit. His influence within the network began almost immediately after their marriage, where once the network had been dominated by preaching, worship, and traditional ministry programming, Doug's expertise in counseling began to shape the content in subtle, then increasingly overt ways. Programming focused on emotional well-being, relationship advice, and personal healing began to take a more central role. For viewers, the change was noticeable. Some welcomed it, appreciating a practical, hands-on approach to issues like marriage, parenting, and family stress. Doug's calm demeanor, his genuine empathy, and his ability to communicate complicated emotional truths in a simple, relatable way resonated with many. His presence made Daystar feel less like a distant television ministry and more like a supportive community where viewers could find guidance for their own lives. But not everyone was happy. Critics argued that the network was drifting away from its core mission of gospel preaching and evangelism, fearing that Doug's counseling-centered programming risked turning Daystar into a self-help platform rather than a spiritual ministry. Doug's influence extended beyond programming. Within months of his marriage to Joni, he became an authoritative figure in decision-making, a behind-the-scenes power broker shaping the network's strategy, vision, and future. It wasn't just about airing shows. Doug helped decide which speakers and ministers were featured, what topics were prioritized, and how the network positioned itself in the competitive world of Christian broadcasting. His rise coincided with Joni's consolidation of power, and together, they became the central axis around which Daystar now revolved. This rapid ascent caused tension, particularly with Jonathan Lamb, Marcus and Joni's son, who had been preparing for years to take on a leadership role. Jonathan had grown up immersed in the ministry, working alongside his father, understanding the mission and building relationships with the staff and audience. He had envisioned a seamless transition, stepping into the leadership role as the natural heir. But with Doug's growing authority and Joni's increasingly centralized leadership, Jonathan found himself sidelined. Decisions that once would have involved him now bypassed him entirely. Meetings, strategic choices, and programming directives were increasingly dominated by Doug and Joni, leaving Jonathan frustrated and, in some ways, powerless. The rift was both professional and personal. It was no longer just about the direction of the network, but about legacy, loyalty, and family trust. Doug's role was seen by some as inseparable from his marriage to Joni, a perception that he had leveraged personal connections for influence, rather than earned it through long service to the ministry. Yet, others recognized the genuine value he brought. Doug's expertise filled a real need, providing guidance to viewers on emotional and relational struggles, complementing Daystar's spiritual mission in a new contemporary way. His presence highlighted the tension between preserving tradition and embracing innovation, between spiritual preaching and practical guidance. As Doug's visibility grew, so did scrutiny. Loyal viewers and donors questioned whether the network's priorities were shifting too far from its original, gospel-centered foundation. Behind the scenes, staff noticed a change in tone. Content decisions became more centralized, the focus more on emotional healing, and the balance of ministry influence tilted toward the couple's vision. While this shift attracted a new audience appreciative of counseling and relationship-friendly programming, longtime supporters sometimes felt alienated, perceiving a drift from Marcus Lamb's original intent. Despite the controversies, Doug's rise could not be denied. He became not just a voice on the network, but a guiding presence, influencing strategy, content, and messaging. His programming reached millions, offering practical guidance and emotional support. And his calm, compassionate demeanor made him relatable in a space often dominated by preaching and high-energy evangelism. He was seen as both a stabilizing and transformative figure, capable of bringing modern relevance to Daystar while navigating the complexities of grief, leadership, and public scrutiny alongside Joni. Doug's ascent also highlighted the interplay of personal relationships and organizational power. His influence was inseparable from his partnership with Joni, and together they represented a new chapter for Daystar. Some admired the continuity and stability they provided, seeing in their leadership a commitment to keeping the network thriving. Others lamented the sidelining of family voices like Jonathan's, worried that the ministry's original spiritual mission was being overshadowed by personal dynamics and a pivot toward therapy-centered content. Ultimately, Doug Weiss's rapid rise at Daystar exemplified the challenges of leadership transitions in family-run ministries. It was a story of influence gained through marriage, expertise, and timing, set against a backdrop of grief, legacy, and public expectation. His ascent reshaped the network, bringing new perspectives and approaches, but also raising questions about balance, tradition, and the role of personal relationships in organizational authority. Father Doug became a defining figure in this new era of Daystar, simultaneously celebrated, scrutinized, and central to the ongoing evolution of one of the world's most influential Christian networks. Jonathan Lamb had always believed his life's work would be a continuation of his father's legacy. From the moment he could remember, he had watched Marcus Lamb build Daystar Network into a powerhouse of Christian media, a beacon of faith and hope for millions around the world. Jonathan worked side by side with his father for years, learning every detail of running the ministry, from the intricacies of programming to the delicate management of donors and partnerships. He knew the schedules, the people, the networks, the mission, and he poured his heart into every task, believing that one day he would step into his father's shoes and carry the ministry forward with the same passion and dedication. When Marcus died unexpectedly, Jonathan felt the weight of loss, not just for his father but for the path he had imagined. The shock of Marcus's passing left the network without its guiding force, and in the chaos that followed, Jonathan assumed that he would naturally rise to fill the void. He was ready, trained, and intimately connected to every corner of the ministry. But reality proved far more complicated than expectation. Joni Lamb, Marcus's widow, stepped into leadership almost immediately. At first, Jonathan supported her, thinking that the mourning period and sudden upheaval required a unified front. He didn't question her decisions, believing she was acting in the ministry's best interest. Yet, as weeks and months passed, Jonathan began to notice that the decisions were increasingly centralized, bypassing him entirely. It wasn't that Joni didn't value Jonathan. On some level, she had always respected his commitment. But grief, power, and the urgency to keep the network running had shifted her approach. Joni had been a background figure for so long, a partner behind the scenes, and now she was asserting authority in ways that changed the family dynamic and the ministry structure. Jonathan found himself increasingly sidelined. Projects he had once managed, decisions he had previously made collaboratively with Marcus, were now handled unilaterally by Joni. Meetings were called without his input, programming changes made without consultation, and financial decisions quietly centralized. The ministry he had grown up in and trained for felt suddenly unfamiliar. Compounding this shift was the entrance of Doug Weiss, Joni's new husband. Doug was a respected marriage counselor, known for his expertise in emotional and relational guidance, but he had little prior involvement in the network. His rise was meteoric. Almost overnight, he became a central figure in the leadership, overseeing programming decisions, shaping the network's content, and wielding influence that Jonathan had assumed would be his by right. Doug's approach, focusing on counseling and emotional well-being, represented a clear pivot from Marcus's gospel-centered mission. While Doug's methods resonated with some viewers, Jonathan and other longtime staff felt the network's original purpose was being diluted. Jonathan's frustration grew as he watched programming he had long nurtured and relationships he had built suddenly restructured or sidelined. He was not excluded because of incompetence. His work had always been meticulous, his judgment trusted by Marcus, his commitment unquestioned. The exclusion felt personal, a rejection not just of his ideas, but of his role as a son, a leader, and a custodian of his father's vision. Family dinners and conversations, once spaces for collaboration and mutual support, became battlegrounds for control and influence. Joni, carrying the weight of grief and responsibility, often dismissed Jonathan's concerns, framing her decisions as necessary for the network's survival. Jonathan, meanwhile, saw them as a departure from the legacy he was meant to protect. The tension was not hidden. Staff noticed it, donors sensed it, and audiences began to perceive subtle changes. Jonathan tried to voice his concerns, seeking dialogue with Joni about programming direction, leadership strategy, and the importance of honoring Marcus's original mission. His pleas were often met with polite acknowledgement, but little meaningful change. Each conversation ended with a sense of frustration, a reminder that he was no longer in the inner circle of decision-making. Slowly, he realized that his voice, cultivated over decades of preparation, was being drowned out. The divide between Jonathan and Joni was not merely professional, it was deeply personal. Jonathan had always seen his mother as a partner in ministry, a co-architect of the empire he loved. Now, her actions seemed to position her and Doug above him, leaving him isolated in a system he had helped build. The sense of betrayal was compounded by public perception. Longtime supporters, unfamiliar with the internal dynamics, saw Joni and Doug as the faces of Daystar, while Jonathan's sidelining became a topic of whispered speculation among staff and donors. His sense of rightful leadership, the inheritance of responsibility he had been groomed for, was increasingly challenged. Jonathan's frustrations eventually moved into the public domain. In interviews, statements, and appearances, he began to express his concern over the direction of the network. He spoke cautiously, emphasizing the importance of the gospel-centered mission while subtly criticizing the shift toward emotional and therapeutic programming. His words resonated with some, sparking debate among the network's followers about the balance between ministry and counseling. Others viewed his comments as resistance to change, an inability to adapt to the new leadership model. Regardless of perception, the tension only deepened. The family dynamic, once rooted in trust, unity, and shared purpose, was fracturing. Jonathan's relationship with Joni became strained. The mother-son bond stretched thin by professional disagreements and differing visions. Private conversations turned tense, emails and memos carried a sharper tone, and every boardroom decision was weighed not just for its impact on the network, but for its potential to exacerbate the family divide. Even small disagreements over staffing, programming schedules, or guest selection became symbolic of the larger struggle for influence and legacy. Through it all, Jonathan remained committed to Daystar. He did not abandon the ministry or the audience he loved. He continued to participate in leadership where he could, offering expertise, guidance, and insight. But his influence was limited. Key decisions were increasingly made by Joni and Doug, leaving Jonathan frustrated and, at times, disheartened. The network he had dreamed of leading, the vision he had cultivated alongside his father, felt increasingly out of reach. The personal cost of this marginalization was profound. Jonathan had invested years of his life in preparation for this moment, yet he now found himself navigating a landscape dominated by grief, new power structures, and evolving priorities. His public statements, carefully measured and respectful, could not fully convey the depth of the emotional toll. Every missed consultation, every overridden decision, and every unilateral action by Joni or Doug served as a reminder that his role, once certain, was now uncertain. Despite these challenges, Jonathan sought to maintain dignity and commitment. He worked quietly, striving to preserve the network's mission while adapting to new realities. He understood that Daystar's future depended not on personal victories, but on the ministry's ability to continue reaching its audience. Yet the emotional strain remained, an undercurrent in every interaction with Joni, Doug, and even staff members caught in the shifting dynamics. The struggle between Jonathan and the new leadership highlighted a broader tension within family-run organizations, the collision of legacy, grief, ambition, and changing priorities. For Jonathan, it was a deeply personal battle. A fight to honor his father, protect the ministry, and assert a rightful role in the leadership he had trained for. It was a story of loyalty confronted with change, preparation confronted with opportunity, seized by others, and love confronted by power dynamics that could not be easily reconciled. Even as the network continued to thrive and adapt under Joni and Doug's leadership, Jonathan's marginalization remained a defining feature of Daystar's recent history. His struggle was not about personal gain, but about preserving a vision, protecting a family legacy, and maintaining integrity in the face of shifting authority. The conflict was complex, deeply human, and ongoing, a reminder that in family-run ministries, the intersection of faith, family, and power can create both extraordinary opportunity and profound tension. Jonathan Lamb's journey through marginalization and conflict is a story of dedication tested by circumstance. It is a tale of a son's devotion to his father's legacy, challenged by grief, new leadership, and shifting priorities. It is a story that resonates with anyone who has faced the painful intersection of family, ambition, and responsibility. And as Daystar continues its path, the echoes of Jonathan's struggle linger, an enduring testament to loyalty, perseverance, and the costs of leadership in a world where personal and professional lines often blur. The Daystar Network, once a clear beacon of Christian teaching and family values, found itself at a crossroads. The sudden passing of Marcus Lamb had left a void that no one could have fully prepared for, and the subsequent rise of Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss shifted the network's identity in ways few anticipated. For decades, Daystar had been defined by Marcus's vision, a blend of heartfelt evangelism, inspirational preaching, and a commitment to reaching audiences with messages of faith and hope. The network was a family affair, grounded in values that emphasized unity, trust, and consistency. Viewers knew what to expect: sermons that uplifted, programs that encouraged, and a sense that the Lamb family was personally invested in each broadcast. That identity was now being rewritten. Joni's ascension to leadership marked the first wave of transformation. She had been the steady hand behind the scenes for years, quietly ensuring that operations ran smoothly, but now she stepped into the spotlight. Her leadership style was more centralized and authoritative than what had been customary under Marcus. Decisions that had once involved collaboration with family members and senior staff were increasingly made from her office alone. While some saw this as necessary to maintain stability after Marcus's death, others, most notably Jonathan Lamb, viewed it as a sharp departure from the inclusive approach that had made the network feel like a family. Then came Doug Weiss, whose influence quickly expanded after his marriage to Joni. Doug was respected as a Christian counselor, known for his work on marriage and emotional health, but he had never held a high-profile role in media management. With Joni's support, however, he gained significant authority over programming, staffing, and strategic direction. His approach emphasized counseling, emotional well-being, and practical guidance for families. While these themes resonated with a segment of Daystar's audience, they also signaled a shift away from the traditional gospel-centered focus that had been the network's hallmark. For many longtime viewers, the emphasis on therapeutic content felt like a departure from the spiritual core they had relied on for guidance and inspiration. The resulting changes created both enthusiasm and skepticism. Some welcomed the new programming as fresh and relevant, offering practical tools for modern living alongside faith-based teachings. Others worried that the network's identity was being diluted, replaced by a model that prioritized personality and therapy over preaching and evangelism. Internally, staff members grappled with the shifting dynamics. Decisions that once flowed through familiar channels were now concentrated in the hands of Joni and Doug. This not only sidelined Jonathan, but also unsettled employees who had long been loyal to Marcus's vision. The tension between maintaining tradition and embracing innovation became a persistent undercurrent, challenging the network to redefine itself without alienating its core audience. For Jonathan, the changes were particularly painful. He had grown up within the ministry, trained to lead, and committed his life to carrying on his father's legacy. Watching the network pivot in a direction he hadn't chosen, while his authority and experience were minimized, was a constant source of frustration and heartbreak. He continued to participate where possible, offering counsel and contributing to projects, but the weight of marginalization was inescapable. His concern was not personal gain, it was about the preservation of the mission he had been raised to uphold. In his view, Daystar's identity, rooted in preaching, evangelism, and spiritual mentorship, was being challenged by a broader focus on emotional and therapeutic content, driven in part by Doug's influence.